Bart Weetjens, welcome to Studio Mycelium, where we interview people who, like mycelium, create networks between people so that mutual help, solidarity, connections are made possible. With these interviews, we especially want to reach people who, in one way or another, are looking to engage, to make connections, but don't quite know how and are in need of examples, best practices, inspiration, hope. So in this way, we hope to facilitate people who want to engage like you. Bart, you are known as a social entrepreneur, a very successful one, but also as a Zen monk, a Zen priest. And that immediately triggered in me the question, who is Bart Weetjens? So not yet the what or the how, but who is Bart? What is driving you? Why are you a social entrepreneur? And more specifically also, why a Zen priest?
Wow, that's a lot. And well, Eric, you asked the most difficult question up front, the who, yeah. Of course, just like everybody, I'm on a journey of discovery who I really am. Yeah. Master Dogen says about that, to practice Zen is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. We'll come back to that point. And to forget the self or to abandon the self is to be confirmed by the myriad of phenomena. So this may be a bit philosophical, but why I'm going there immediately is because you immediately ask an interesting question. But let's maybe see from the outside world, who is Bart? So yes, I'm a Zen monk. I'm also a loving dad of two wonderful daughters. I'm also a social entrepreneur indeed. I'm also a rat lover. I'm also a punk. I'm also an authentic speaker publicly. I am also, for many people, a life coach, well-being coach. Yeah, who I try to be really is to be authentic. I think that's the key of the key to this person in the universe to make things go smooth and harmonious. I think it's really about living an authentic life. And okay, in my case, it's in Zen tradition, yeah. More specifically in the Soto Zen school, where we are now. I'm here in the temple in Nice, in south of France, with my teacher. The practice of Zen is a very person-to-person transmission, where a journey practice is obviously connected with community, with following a teacher, to be able to teach myself, right? Yeah, to come back to your question, I think Bart, who is Bart? Bart is somebody who tries to be authentic.
Bart, if you say that you try to be, yes, Bart, if you say that you try to be authentic, is that also what drove you when you started in the second half of the 90s with this project called Apopo? You had a vision. That's what I find at your website. You had a vision. You're writing there to strengthen the most vulnerable communities of subsistence farmers in sub-Saharan Africa by training rats to become sustainable detectors in response to the global landmine problem. So, if you're writing that, is that what was at the origin of what you were trying to do there? What you were trying to start up in those years? Authenticity?
Well, I think it's part of the authenticity journey. Somehow I think this was written in the stars for somehow on my life path. And to go back to that time, actually this initiative of training rats to empower vulnerable communities in the global south to tackle difficult, expensive and dangerous detection challenges really came out of a deep personal crisis. I graduated in product design at Antwerp University, and I had a focus on appropriate technologies for countries. At that time, we called them developing countries. Being exposed and traveling in Africa, I saw how devastating the landmine problem was. It's really a structural barrier to any development. Subsistence farmers whose land, even without landmines, but whose land is suspected, they flee from their villages and they settle in refugee camps for generations. So reclaiming that land, making it safe, allows these people to return to their villages and lead a life free from fear, which is essential. Now, myself, as a product designer, graduating from Antwerp University and having worked a year in the industry, I really didn't find my place in a way of in an economy that is exploitative, in an economy that first of all, I mean it's a linear in a linear economy, especially where I didn't find myself. Extraction, consumption, extraction, production, consumption, disposal. Yeah? And as such, humanity, we are not only polluting the world, but we're also depleting it of its resources, and with all the consequences we can see now, incredible inequality, climate change as a result. The challenges are now, I guess, more complex, urgent, and challenging as it was in the 90s. However, I felt already then that, and even earlier during my studies, I was doubting about having a job in the industry, contributing to this exploitative system. So I looked for an alternative. And that required a lot of courage. I don't think I would have had that courage if it weren't that I was in a deep personal crisis. I basically had no other choice. I had turned my back to the industry, and where I survived, let's say, as an artistic painter. Until Mick Billet, the chair of Department of Product Development at Antwerp University at that time, he approached me and he said, "Hey Bart, you graduate with really good results, but I find it a waste that you spend your time on painting. Why wouldn't you?" I mean, he knew that I was so socially committed, so he said, "Why don't you think of a real world problem and take it hands-on, find a solution for that?" And shortly before that, I had seen Princess Diana walking in a minefield, near minefields in Angola, and that really struck me. The fact that these landmines pose a structural barrier to development. Now, at that time, there were still like around 20,000 legal accidents with landmines worldwide per year. This has now been pushed down incredibly in the last few years, although in recent years, through conflicts in the Middle East and in Ukraine now, there's again an increase in casualties. Now, this aside, I looked at this problem, and I think here is a key to what you are after with Mycelium: how to engage, how to cooperate, what kind of vision to deploy, really. So I think the difference between what I did and what really hundreds of engineering departments at various universities worldwide did in response to this call for novel technologies, I placed myself in the situation of that subsistence farmer, a villager who basically has almost no means, lives on $1 a day, but nowadays maybe $3, but really like on the edge of extreme poverty, and who is incapable to access their land. My vision was to empower these people to take on that problem by themselves. I had visited mine action programs in Mozambique, in Angola, and I had seen how these operations are highly technical, but also leave those countries completely dependent on expensive imported know-how and goods. Mine action operations are not only highly technical, they're also highly dangerous. So there's lots of procedures, and if you follow all the procedures, then find it's relatively safe in a minefield. But there's lots of procedures which require a level of education to be literate with these explosive devices and know how to deal with them. The biggest bottleneck in the whole mine action cycle is detection of the devices. There's a lot of suspected land, and actually only a very small percentage of that land contains landmines. So my goal was in the first place to release land and to use a method for that that is renewable, that is sustainable, that is locally available to anyone. Now, okay, that's where my analysis of the landmine problem went. I need to rewind, let's say I need to rewind 15 years. When I was 9 years old, I received a hamster for my birthday. And I was very fond of that hamster. So fond that I gave it a mate in the cage, and they had babies. I brought them to pet shops, and basically out of that resulted the whole breeding program in my bedroom of various types of rodents, squirrels, even rats, mice, hamsters, gerbils, and so on. Now, I left that when I was 14, but I had a real passion for rodents. While doing an analysis of the landmine problem, I met with a Dutch designer, in ten Haven, who had a scholarship from the Dutch government to make an analysis of this landmine problem. So we met at a conference on mine action detection and especially detection technologies in Edinburgh. And we were the only two people in that entire room where they were speaking of robots, multi-sensor platforms, ground penetrating radar, infrared sensors, and all these high-tech approaches. We were the only two people with a vision of appropriate technology to solve this. And Ine was at the end of his research cycle. He had received that scholarship, and he had a lot of information, and he passed it on to me. I'll never forget the moment around a single malt whiskey in a bar in Edinburgh, late night. I think the second evening of that conference, where Ine basically passed on the whole pack of research papers and all the documentation that he had found. And browsing through that huge pile of publications, I incidentally come to an article by two Jewish American scientists who had provided proof of principles that rodents, the gerbils in this case, could discriminate the scent of explosives. For me, this was a total aha-erlebnis. Of course, I knew I was going to train rats, simply because for me it was, I guess, natural to connect those dots. Now, this research was really a proof of principle in a lab situation, where with electrical brain stimulation, which requires intruding the brain with electrodes to be able to stimulate them electrically. So not a very sustainable and animal-friendly approach as I envisaged. I wanted to go for a very respectful way to use natural resources together jointly and actually create something that is a system that is self-supportive, sustainable, and solving real-world problems. I knew I was going to train rats, but I didn't know which rat. So I went to the university, the biology department in Antwerp. It's well renowned, and then there's a lot of research going on rodents. And at that time, Professor Ron Verhagen, he suggested to use the African giant pouched rat, which is a rat that lives up to 8 years easily in captivity, and which has the natural behavior of searching for food storage underground. It actually it makes burrows underground, collects food in the rainy season, and then finds that food back based on their olfactory sense, which is already really close to, well, looking for targets underground. So connecting all these things and creating a group of researchers around this, we knew we were going to train rats to save human lives. And that's where this initiative comes from. So to answer your question about like what kind of vision and where does this come from, actually, this is, and I truly believe this is the success of Apopo, is that is it's based on radical solidarity. With a vision for authenticity, for sustainability, social innovation, but it is a radical choice. It is so much easier to engage and indulge in the stories that we tell ourselves, and not having to see the whole, but looking at our little turf and developing a profit mind, while to be truly of meaning, to build true purpose, we need significance. We need to be meaningful to others, and that requires to abandon a mind that is always wanting to grasp, always wanting to identify, and to gain. Yeah.
Bart, you're talking about meaning, about purpose. Today, if you look around, especially in the entrepreneurial world, this is the subject for employers, employees. They're looking for meaning, for purpose. And although it is quite a subject today, most of them are struggling so hard to find this meaning, to find this purpose. What is going on?
Yeah, what is going on? I think the results of what I mentioned earlier. It's a world of separation. It's the disconnect. There's a number of things: individuality, individualism. I mean, materialism. But they are actually, how can I say, manifestations of what the human mind is in nature. When we're born, we're immediately separate, and so the ego feels like, I need to grasp things to survive, and so on. I mean, a lot of things come from there. Going beyond that grasping mind, going beyond a mind that sees itself separate from the universe, is where we can find meaning. Because obviously, in essence, we only exist in relation to the universe. And we fail to see that. Often we think we manage and we rule the world, and but actually we are, like many thinkers these days say, what we need to do is to move from ego to eco, to see ourselves not on top, but to see ourselves as part of the system. And then it becomes simply natural to serve. The right action becomes automatic. And also purpose becomes very clear. If we are leading a life of service to a higher goal, to a social goal, to address an injustice in society, to support other people on their journey, it automatically leads to a meaningful life. It gives us meaning to be of service to others.
I want to come back to the subject of separateness and connectedness, but maybe first from the 90s, fast forward 20 years later, when Apopo had grown into a global humanitarian project. Your organization was one of the leading social enterprises in the world, recognized and honored, awarded by networks like Ashoka, the Skoll Awards, the World Economic Forum. But that does something with a person, doesn't it?
It does, yes. I didn't escape over-identification with my brain baby. Indeed, while the organization gained more attention, I have to say it was a long journey. It was a long research and development journey before we had the first results in the field, and then before we could prove operational efficiency and all that. It's been a long journey, but by 2015, we had managed to clear the remaining minefields in Mozambique by means of our hero rats. And we did that 2.5 years ahead of the country's schedule. Major milestone for Apopo. By then, close to 1 million people had been returning to their villages. So I'm talking about subsistence farmers who actually went back in country instead of dwelling in slums around main cities. At that time, I felt it is time for me to let go of. I was struggling with this identification because obviously an organization grew. It wasn't just a small research group anymore. No, by now, Apopo was an international organization, programs in 10 countries, offices in Washington, in Geneva, starting up in London, offices in Antwerp. And how can I say? I think people are good in one phase of a project, and in another phase, people with other talents are needed. I may be an innovator, and I may be a searcher, a spiritual searcher in the first place. I may not necessarily be very happy with leading an organization with hundreds of employees worldwide. There's other people more skilled for that. But it took me a while to find that out for myself. As I progressed and while living in Africa, also deepened my Zen practice there, it became clearer and clearer to me that, my journey was a spiritual one. I felt there's more purpose, more meaning for me in this field than there is in actively hands-on. Important to do, actively hands-on, build a better society. But by focusing on the practice, I stayed at the source of the mind that led to this societal engagement. And that for me is really key. So talking about separation is, and to come back to the other part of what you wanted to talk about, in presence, and presence I define as embodied awareness. The practice of Zen can be basically secularized, or when you speak in a secular way about the practice of Zen, the practice of seated meditation, it's a practice of presence. It's a practice of embodied awareness. We let go of all our thoughts, important thoughts, ridiculous thoughts. They all pass by like clouds in the sky, but we focus on that wide sky. Yeah? The way to do this is a very, very simple method that has been transmitted since Buddha Shakyamuni 2,500 years ago, is by embodying awareness, by focusing on the body posture and following the breathing. These two anchors basically align us with reality in the very moment. And things become very clear what is to do. If we are humbly reconnecting with the present moment, what happens is it's like magic somehow. And why this is so important in social change or any work really, any change work in society is that very often our mind is wandering. Research shows that around half of the time that we are awake, our mind is wandering. So not only these are the generally unhappier moments, but basically they're spoiled. Either we're dwelling in the past, regretting things that happened, or having an internal dialogue, or I should have said this, done that, etc. That doesn't alleviate anything. Or we're anxiously about the future and calculating, projecting, analyzing, and so on. Great, but it doesn't really change reality. The only way we can change reality is here and now. And by focusing or concentrating on body posture, the body is really here at any given moment. Our body carries us. The breath is always now. It's always in the present moment. So these two anchor points of posture, let's say embodied awareness, and breath, staying in the present moment, allow us to embrace reality in a joyful way.
And would you say, Bart, that this is what helped you there somewhere 2014, 2015 to make the transition also from going away from your own organization, your own child, to another situation, to a new phase? This is what helped you.
Absolutely. And of course, this didn't work from day one to day two, but I've been practicing meditation since I was a student. Yeah, so in I'm talking now late 80s, early 90s, I started practicing, and you have to see this as a journey that is deepening gradually. So by 2015, I had already some 25 years of practice. And it became clear to me that the more I detach and deepen practice, with detaching, I mean from materialism, individual, detach from my own opinions about things, and trust the universe. The easier that becomes. I don't say it was an easy journey. Of course, there's a lot of ego involved. Of course, I over-identified with being the founder of Apopo, etc. Yet, in hindsight, because it's now 8 years ago, as difficult as it was to completely reset and start a life based on practice, as difficult as this was, it was the right thing to do. But it required a lot of confidence, a lot of courage, and also, well, the curiosity I naturally had, but it required especially a lot of courage to let go of that. And I think this thing of basically letting go and surrender really to a reality that had already overtaken. Basically, my role in the organization was one of fundraising. I did some business modeling, but I felt the organization was moving on and on a larger scale. And that is great. That ultimately was my goal also, to have a real impact in the world. But it required me to take a step back, to take a step inward.
But I remember you doing this TED Talk in 2014, talking about inner well-being. You now, in hindsight, talk about a period of transition. What I'm wondering is, how did your environment react to this, well, really fundamental change? Did they react positively, or did they react what is happening with Bart? How did that go?
Yeah. Well, I got a lot of support from my family. My kids were, even if they knew that, well, financially we might not be in the same situation, but they supported me. And I think it's because of the authenticity. I made an authentic choice, and as difficult as this was, because we'll come to well-being soon. These first months, I resigned from my executive job with Apopo, and yeah, they were very difficult. I can't deny that. I deepened practice. I did a permaculture design course because I felt like, well, really the next thing based on this vision of respect for the earth and building earth by cleaning landmines, but also rebuilding the earth. How can we create a regenerative momentum worldwide? And I'm delighted to see this happen now. And just to be clear, like all over the world, thousands and thousands of initiatives around permaculture and regenerative agriculture and so on. Incredible. That's really grateful to see. I believe actually there is kind of a global consciousness there. But at that time, it was deep crisis for me. It was, I really didn't see the way forward. I learned how to keep bees, and contact with the earth was very healing for me. I did all kinds of therapeutic approaches that helped me a lot in getting to know who is Bart. Yeah? Coming back to the first question, but that it is the most difficult. The what and the why and the how, the less difficult than to really know who we are. And by now, through, among others, the Wellbeing Project, which is also like a movement that, well, a catalyst spark basically in the social innovation space, where, well, worldwide there are thousands and thousands of people who dream and work for a better world. Very often, just like I was, it was done in a spirit of sacrifice, of heroism, and which is a kind of disguised ego thing, yeah, and which creates all kind of unhealthy narratives in leadership. And since leadership is really important, it determines the culture in an organization. Yeah, since that is really really important, I would say there is a big need for leadership that embraces inner work, because, and well, it's also scientifically proved, a lot of research on this. Leaders who are capable of being more present, they easier understand their needs, their personal needs, and they're better in building healthy boundaries around their personal needs. They're more approachable at any given moment. They're more aware, more present in any given situation. They're also more capable of detaching from the roles they play. Very often, especially in companies, we over-identify with a particular role we play, and that makes us suffer. However, if leadership can be shared in more horizontal ways in organizations, automatically you get more autonomy, more connection between staff, and all this leads to happier people, less burnouts, more efficiency in the work, and ultimately more sustainability of the results, of the outcome of that work. So on all levels, we have an interest to, instead of tackling the world hands-on, of course important, but before that, to take a step inward. And from there, from that clarity, from that calm, from that feeling of deep connection with all that exists, we can automatically engage almost, almost unconscious, I would say. In a natural way, we can engage with the problem at hand. Albeit a problem as simple as washing the dishes or as complex as climate change. The whole range in between. If we approach it from inner peace, with compassion and wisdom and loving kindness and equanimity, the result automatically becomes good. Anyway, but, maybe I'm going far beyond your question here.
No problem. But maybe, well, a delicate question. within the well-being, the Inner Wellbeing Project, but you also yourself, in your work as an independent, you work a lot with C-level people. What is your view today on them? Is there hope? I apologize for asking this question in this way, because I think many people have the idea of this sea level somewhere high in the sky, that it isn't connected with the real world problems, that it isn't connected with care for the world, and so on and so on. So here's my question. What would you say? You are a lot in contact with, may I say, these kind of people. So what is your view on them, and what would you say to this question?
Yeah. Well, it is true. I'm coaching a lot of leaders in the corporate world. And I would say, well, those that come to me obviously ask themselves questions, and it's not surprising that, for instance, in the financial world, I have very little clients. Not surprisingly, because it's so remote and the system is so abstracted from reality. Those leaders who are by now not yet aware of the real pressing challenges in the world, I do not think they can stay in a leadership role much longer. New leadership requires inner work. It's as simple as that. It is only those who have the courage to, well, take a step back. And with taking a step back, I actually mean take a step inward, discover their inner space, and those who look for meaning and purpose. Those find automatically innovative ways of leading their organizations and companies. And you see, well, I witness all kinds of transformative movements that I see in the industry. It doesn't go fast enough, but we're taking off, and you see unlikely alliances these days. You see leaders that are indeed capable, based on a vision of inner well-being, to somehow blur the boundaries of their roles in the organization, who dare to build quality time for deep sharing, for values, for and all kinds of things, like training in emotional intelligence and so on. Yeah, so I'm really convinced that new leadership is one that comes from a personal inner leadership. And for that, we need, of course, because that is now maybe the next hype or the next trap, let's say. Because what does that mean? An inner journey, and well, it needs to be an authentic journey. There is a strong secularization these days, and I think for good reasons. However, we need to take care that we don't throw away the message, the child with the bathwater, right? Obviously, there's a lot of value in a religious experience, and to move even away from a religious experience, there's a lot of value in spirituality. Well, Space Forum, where we are both involved, we have this definition, and which I really like. It was a nice group work with a multi-plural group, where we came to the point, like, what is spirituality really? Well, it is, I think we concluded it's a skill. It's a skill to be inspired and to inspire others. And well, if we take that as a basis, then it doesn't really matter what spiritual tradition, what inspires you, as long as it's authentic and it's grounded, and it's centered around deep connectedness with all that is. Okay, I'm going to leave it there for that answer.
Bart, another question. You were more in the beginning of our conversation, you were talking about all kinds of problems, social inequality, the ecological crisis, and so on and so on. Do you feel that positive change is really possible? Sometimes today it seems that the contradictions, the polarization worldwide, but also here in the West and even in our own neighborhoods nearby are only increasing. And on top of that, the number of symptoms like social inequality, conflicts, the climate issue also seems so gigantic and complex that quite a few people risk losing hope as well as their dreams also. So what would be your message to them, starting from your experience also in working with C-level people and in moving around in different industries today?
Yeah, and this is not excluded to C-levels. It's general. If you ask, for instance, the lady with 5 children, with less opportunities, and a Muslim woman with 5 children who lives around my corner, who has less work opportunities and so on, who really isn't on top of the game, let's say, but she's very much on top of the game, because she's very much in the here and now, in a caring situation where she cares for her children. Well, I lost it here a bit. Let's get back to what was the question again? Yeah.
Well, my question is, in a time where we have all these problems and people are looking at these problems and maybe losing hope, maybe losing their dreams, what is your message to those people?
Fear the right things, I would say. We have the privilege to be so well informed these days, or to have so much information these days. But I think there's also a lot of misinformation there, and it's really tough to sort out sources and so on. That the challenges are complex, urgent, and many. That is clear. However, if we lose hope, we lose our capability to address these challenges. It is really essential to keep hope, and to keep hope, there's many things we can do, but very often, at least in what I notice for myself, is then if I nudge down a little and focus on a real thing, as small as doing the laundry or doing the dishes, a real world problem, as minimal as it may be in one household, or any little task, taken on with caring, loving attention, immediately sparks that hope again, because through that meaningful activity, I get the confirmation from the world that indeed things can be changed. And often it is just that spark that is needed to rejuvenate my hope. So whenever I'm desperate, I do simple things, very simple things like doing laundry, doing dishes, the chores, the general things. Very simple, hands-on things in the here and now for others.
Maybe, but this connects also with another question I have. What would you say to people who feel called to do something, to roll up their sleeves, to change something, to make their contribution to a better world? Where do they start? How to begin?
Well, 2 things. One is there's lots of initiatives. For instance, there's lots of initiatives, and people know where they can be of service if they deeply listen into themselves. And that's the second thing. I mean, to be able to make a good choice there, like where to put their energy, listening to what they're, again, come back to the present moment, listening to who you really are. Yeah? And knowing that this is a discovery journey, while attentively being in the present moment, things come at us. That's how the universe works. If we make a step forward, the universe comes a step our way. And basically, automatically, the answer to that question, like how to engage, where to engage, what to do, actually that becomes clear. If we can let go of all that anxiety, a lot of loss of hope is because there is so much anxiety and there is so much grief and regret. So there's a kind of a global consciousness around these things that is growing, but that risk to push us out of ourselves, basically, in the sense of to estrange us from ourselves, in a sense, because we become anxious and nervous, and there's all kinds of things in society, like the publicity, TV, not that those are bad, but there's a lot of complexity coming at us that actually is important to learn to discern what is important and what not. And building a strong foundation of non-fear, yeah? And that's a place where I want to go, non-fear, because well, that is the way forward, basically. And then it becomes clear. If we make a step inward, we start to trust more. Things become clearer. Opportunities, new possibilities reveal themselves. And and so for me, the answer is always whatever challenge there is in the outside world is basically a reflection of something that hasn't been brought to consciousness yet. It's what Jung says, by the way. I mean, Carl Gustav Jung says, like, any situation that is not brought, we put it the other way, any situation that is not brought to consciousness shows up in the world, in the outer world, as faith, right? I really like that, because indeed I see many things in the world, the challenges, etc. Whenever I see, and the way, of course, I look at this, the issue, I look from my personal point of view, from if I see that as, ooh, this overcomes me, it means that, well, I may end in a victim situation, and like, well, there's nothing I can do. I lose hope. I see evil everywhere. While, no, if I make a conscious step towards conscientization, towards more awareness in the first place of who I am and how I interact with the world, and of any situation of conflict, bring that to consciousness, then automatically I can get out of that situation of being a victim of the circumstances and create proactively, with confidence, create that world that I dream of.
So would you say that hope, Bart, is also something active, not something passive? It's something active. You do something to create that hope also, or to find that hope.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. The hope is a verb.
All right, Bart Weetjens, thank you so much for your time. Very kind of you to talk with us, to talk with Studio Mycelium. I wish you all the best. Also there in the dojo in Nice, because that's where you're staying right at the moment, I think, eh?
Yes. Officially, it's called Gyobutsuji Temple. It's Gyo is practice, Butsu is Buddha, Ji is the place of the practice of the Buddha. So yeah, Gyobutsuji temple or the dojo, the Zen dojo in Nice. That's where I am at the moment. Yes.
So Bart, thank you very much. I'm very honored that you were talking to Studio Mycelium, and so wish you all the best over there in Nice, and have a nice day.
Most welcome, Erik. It was a pleasure.